Hey everyone, in this video we will be looking at some really instructive endgames that came from some recent over-the-board tournaments I played in. I actually played in 2 tournaments in the last 2 weeks, and some of those games came with some really interesting endgame positions, and I think it's always good to learn from actual positions that come from real amateur games. So without further ado, let me share them with all of you. So in this first position, I'm playing with the white pieces. Black is going this way, so they're 1 square away from promotion. And if you've seen this position before, you are probably very familiar with the idea. You probably know exactly what to do, but if you're not familiar with this pretty textbook endgame, you might be a little bit confused. So first of all, I'd like you to figure out, is this position for white a win, a loss, or a draw? And then of course, what is the move to achieve that particular result that you've decided on? So if you'd like, you can go ahead and pause the video and try and figure this one out for yourself. Okay, so before we get to the answer, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background on this game. I had 1.2 seconds on the clock when we achieved this position. There was a 5-second delay, so essentially I had about 5 seconds every single move to make a decision and move my piece and touch the clock. So it was extremely stressful, and I was really glad that I had seen this particular endgame pattern before because I knew exactly what to do. So this position is actually winning for the white pieces, and that may seem kind of weird because there really seems to be no way to stop this pawn from promoting to a queen, and of course with best play that's going to be a win for black, and at the very worst we might end up drawing the game if we can trade off the rook for the queen. The winning move in this position is to actually allow black to promote and play the move king to g3. The problem, of course, is that if black ends up promoting to a queen, imagine this queen is not on the board. You might look at this configuration of the kings and notice that this is exactly the way that we checkmate with a rook. It doesn't matter that there's a queen on the other side of the king because we just have checkmate. The queen can't do anything. So after we play the move king g3, there's nothing else that black can really do except to promote to a knight, and that's exactly what my opponent did in the game. Reached over, grabbed a knight from my pile of pieces, and placed it on the board in place of his pawn. Of course, this is a check to the king, and the king has to move, but this is still winning for white. You might have stopped here and thought, I really don't know how to draw this endgame, but the critical move here is to move the king over to f3, and now there's nothing that black can do to hang on to this knight. There's only one legal move for the king because, of course, the rook is cutting off these squares as well as the king. And if the king makes that legal move, of course, we have the checkmate once again. If instead the knight moves, there's no way for black to hold on to that knight. If it goes here, we'll just snap it off the board and black can't recapture because it's defended by the king. And of course, the only other square for the knight to move is here, and then we have the same sort of situation. Hopefully you know how to win this endgame. So again, going back to this critical position, moving the king up to g3, taking the opposition, and with this rook pawn, this is a very important endgame to know. You may have seen this sort of thing in a textbook and thought, how will that ever occur in a game? I promise you it does, and when you have 1.2 seconds on the clock, you will be grateful that you knew this kind of a pattern. So let's take a look at our next position. In this game, I was actually playing with the white pieces, but we're looking at it from black's perspective because black is the one that has the winning move here, and I actually made a mistake by mindlessly moving my pawn up to g4. So go ahead and pause the video. It is black to move and see if you can figure out the winning move for black in this position. Okay, so one of the first things you should notice about this position is that this is a bishop endgame. We have bishops that are on the same colored squares, and a good rule of thumb, of course, is that opposite colored bishops are often a drawn endgame. Even if one side has an extra 1 or 2 pawns, there's just often no way for either side to make progress. So opposite bishops are drawn, but same colored bishops, usually one side is able to eke out a win, and this particular position was no different. The other thing you should notice, of course, is that these bishops are actually staring at each other, only blocked by 1 pawn. So the winning move in this position is actually to let the bishops have a go at each other. We can push forward the c-pawn. And why does this actually work? Well, in the game, I had thought I had calculated this, but I missed one crucial move. So I thought that after the pawn went forward, I could actually afford to capture the bishop because after this pawn captured on b2, I was just in time to swing my bishop back and cover the square where black's pawn would like to promote, and black would simply be down a bishop. What I missed, of course, is that after this pawn moves forward, and if I were to take the bishop, this pawn does not have to capture the pawn on b2. It can simply move forward, and now there's no way for white to stop the promotion on the c1 square because it's a dark square. We don't have a dark squared bishop. We've just missed our chance to stop the pawn on the light squares, and this king is just simply not in time. So, like I said, the correct move is actually moving the pawn forward, and in this case I realized immediately what I had done wrong. I had just completely missed that black didn't have to take this pawn. They could just simply keep going forward. So my best try here was to, first of all, give the check with the pawn, and then after the king moved, I had to move the bishop, give up that pawn, and swing back to protect. But of course, after quite a few more accurate moves later, my opponent was able to convert the extra pawn, get their king involved, and it was pretty hard to hold with just a bishop against a queen. So huge props to my opponent for being super accurate and seeing this really cool endgame tactic of the bishops looking at each other, and of course being able to convert that extra pawn. And now we have our final position, and I think this is the hardest one. There's only pawns on the board, there's no other pieces, but of course, if you've studied endgames at all, you know that these are often the most complicated kind. So I will give you a hint right off the bat. In this game, I'm playing with the black pieces, and I ended up playing the losing move. There's only one move that allows black to hold the draw. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find the one move that draws for black. Okay, so first let's talk about what actually happened in this game. And by the way, this was a game I played with Todd Wolf. If you've been following the channel for a while, you may have seen my video playing Blitz with him. We talked about this game afterwards, but neither of us noticed this drawing opportunity until much later when we were analyzing the game. So in this position, the wrong move that I played was capturing this h4 pawn. And my idea was that after white inevitably captures back, I can go like this, and if white tries to go after my pawns on this side, I can capture here, and white would simply not be in time to promote a pawn of their own because I would have this very clear path to promotion, and white would need to get rid of yet another pawn, and if you calculate this all the way to the end, obviously the pawn race, black is just winning here. Another thing I calculated in this position is after takes and takes, if white decides to stick around closer to these pawns, I could simply take and take this one, and now wherever white goes, I will simply run my way back and eat up the pawns on the other side of the board, leaving this one as a decoy for white to have to go and grab before they're able to get back and save their other pawns. So I thought I had calculated everything, but of course that's what you think always right before you lose. So I had missed just one thing, and that is after takes and takes, and I go after these pawns, white simply doesn't have to sit around and let me take them. White can just sacrifice one of these pawns, trade everything off, and then use that distraction of my king to infiltrate and go after these pawns himself. So white played the very accurate g5. I can't, of course, try and keep my pawn on the board because my king is just never going to be able to catch up to this guy. And so here I was just forced to take, and after takes, the white king is just simply getting in here. So a few more moves later, we can see the way that Todd was able to just eat up all my pawns, and I mean, it's a 3 against 1. There's pretty much no stopping at least one of those guys from promoting to a queen, and I played it out a little bit. I do like to play out even clearly losing endgames against stronger players just to see how they convert a clearly winning position, but I ended up resigning here. So going all the way back to this key moment, let's see if we can find it. Right here, there's only one drawing move in this position, and that move is d4, trading off this isolated central pawn. If the c pawn takes and the king takes on d4, white's best chance is simply to dance around with the king, continuing to take opposition, and there's just really no way for either side to break through. You can play around with this. There's a few more critical moments if, the kings diverge in opposite directions, but the best chance for both sides is simply to dance around. So if black goes here, white can follow, white can also just capture here. This pawn does a really nice job of holding off these two doubled pawns, which are just never going to be able to break through. and white's king will take a million years to go and get this guy out of the way. Meanwhile, we can just hang around this side of the board, and white will just be forced to stick around as well and prevent our king from infiltrating too. Here, king c2 is the only way to prevent the black king from getting up here, and again, we're just going to be dancing around forever and ever and ever. So a few key takeaways from this position. It doesn't matter here that black is down a pawn, because this pawn does a really good job of holding off these doubled pawns, which together are just never able to break through. Eventually, once this tension is relieved, either by white pushing forward to d5 or just simply capturing here, we can capture back, and it will be really difficult for white to come in and get a passed pawn going. So doubled pawns are really weak in the endgame. Another thing is to trade off your weaknesses. So here, our main weakness in this position is this isolated d-pawn. So of course, the winning move, or the drawing move, as we talked about, was to get rid of that weakness. And as soon as we do that, the draw is a lot easier to hold and to visualize. So my key takeaways from these endgames, especially the ones that I ended up losing, is that I need to calculate and throw a wider net when I'm calculating my opponent's possible moves. So a lot of things were just simply my opponent's resources that I had missed. I hadn't even considered them because I got so stuck calculating just one line that I thought worked. So in the future, I'm hoping to really focus on that when I'm working on calculation and consider all of my opponent's options and see whether or not I can refute them with the move that I'm considering. I hope these endgames were instructive and helpful for you too. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.